Welcome along to the Make It Count podcast. My name is David.
My name is Matt.
And we are the Taylor Bros. We've been doing a series, haven't we?
We have. Being Real in an Artificial World.
Yeah, Being Real in an Artificial World is a really good title. Well done, Matt.
Thank you very much.
And we talked about that sort of online world maybe not being our true representation, but actually I heard someone recently mention that actually in some ways our online self is our most authentic self because it is our ideal self. Most of us will have a good idea of what an ideal self looks like, but if you're not sure, it's basically who you want to be.
Yep.
It's the things you aspire to be.
And it's often maybe the self that we put forward. So we talk about putting our best foot forward, or I don't know, the best face or something like that. So that is that's what we aspire to be, and that's what we try to do when we're trying to impress someone that maybe we respect or would like.
Mm-hmm. And it was interesting to me because it made me think of several things. One, hey, I like that it pushes back a little bit on what we talk about maybe the online world being artificial, because actually there is a realness there. If it's our best self, our ideal self, that also tells us something. Yeah, I used to play quite a lot of computer games on my Xbox, and
One of
the games or types of games I liked to play was role-playing games where you are a character, you can level them up, and you start making decisions that impact it. And I used to play some Star Wars games, and you would have decisions that would make you go more to the light side or more to the dark side. And in those games, even though they were only games, I would almost always make decisions that would move me to the light side. My character would be, like glowing blue and white because of how light all these decisions I'd made. And then it's like, well, that's because that's my ideal self. I want to choose the right choice, the right decision, which is quite interesting.
That is interesting. I can't remember what I did. I was probably a little bit more ambivalent, more in the middle.
Take his money.
Sometimes I did like to embody the toddler me, running around with a stick and just bashing people.
So, yeah.
We never played Grand Theft Auto, but probably would have been very good at that game.
I have no further comments. But yeah, so the ideal self is a really interesting thing, because then it tells us something about our desires as well, and our desires are a bit of who we are, and about who we want to portray online.
Yeah.
So worth examining that as an idea as well.
Yeah, it's an intriguing enough idea that we thought we could spit 10 minutes of an episode on it. One of the thoughts that I was pondering about this, your online self is your most authentic because it's your ideal. But there's also an element of we take filters off as well. So we engage, in a sense, more authentically online because of the separation. We talked about that, there's this barrier, you would have heard the term maybe keyboard warriors. We come out, we're maybe a little bit more gusto, we say things in a way that we wouldn't in face to face. And often I've heard that used, and I've even spoken about this in the past, of, in real life, in face to face, you wouldn't say that. So, engage online as you would in face to face. And I think there's definitely something to that. But there is this element of maybe when I feel a little bit more protected in my space, I have a sanctum where I do my whatever online, actually I am coming across more unfiltered and therefore more authentic than I would do in a social setting where I feel, well, there's other people here, there's risks at engaging on that level. I might not like it, I might not like that, they might even throw me out, or physical harm might come to me. So again, there is that element of when I feel more safe, because I'm behind my keyboard or whatever, I do come across, these are my genuine feelings. And yeah, there is obviously that risk of I then maybe getting an echo chamber, and it changes me more than it's not just I show up authentically, it's in that space I'm also changed.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting idea that actually when we say more, and that is an authentic form. Now obviously mostly we're going to push back on our examples of seeing that, shall we say, because often that is maybe not the best side of humanity put forward, shall we say. But yeah, it is interesting in itself. And I suppose my main thing about this phrase because I think it is really useful to examine your ideal self. If your ideal self is, hey, I'm always going on adventures, or hey, I look good in these photos because I'm doing this, I'm eating out, or that's worth examining, because we are there are often, I've heard people say there are two drivers for us. We're pulled towards what we want and we push away from what we don't want. There's the love and the fear, the push and the pull. And so it's like, well, what we want or what we'd like our ideal self to be is pulling us somewhere.
Yes.
And so examining that, well, what am I trying to put out there that I want people to think? Or this is my ideal self. Because that is interesting, because actually we can shape that. Yeah. We can choose what that thing is that we most desire, what our ideal self is. And sometimes, as the Dallas Willard quote basically says, it's not what you do, it's who you become.
Yes.
And how many of us, when we think of our ideal self, are really thinking about who we are as people?
Mm.
Well, when I think of my ideal self, actually, I'm here and I'm doing this thing, and I'm, immediately I'm doing a thing. It's not, I've become a person.
I see.
And I'm a person of patience and grace and love. Actually, often it's I'm on an adventure. I'm, doing a cruise, or I get to have the best meal, or I have loads of money, so I can, or I'm in a mansion, so it means I have done. And so, even examining those ideal selves can be quite revealing for us and quite useful in that way.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've never seen a Pinterest board with pictures of people being shouted at and responding calmly.
Yeah.
But you see a Pinterest board of like the ideal house or the ideal wedding or adventures or all these things, and those are this is the thing I'm pursuing. Of course, most of life isn't that. It's not that sprinkling those in or pursuing adventure is a bad thing in of itself. But we're often thinking of ourselves in motion or doing a thing or the ideal job.
And I suppose some of the other things I've been reading recently is just the inner self, if that is a strong and sure place, doesn't matter what the external is happening. It doesn't matter if the worst things are happening to you, if you are internally in a healthy place, then it doesn't matter. And this is why I'd push back on the quote that, our online self is in some ways our most authentic self because it is our ideal self, but we are not our ideal selves. That is the reality.
It's the ideal, it's not the real.
It's not necessarily. And it's not real, but it's not the full, true reality of who we are.
Yeah, we don't embody that self all the time.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that, and some people have said, so we should show all our flaws online as well. I'm not sure that's the best thing to do as well.
There are spaces where that's helpful and not so helpful.
Yeah, and in terms of if you were in-person meeting, there are some people you would be vulnerable and open with your flaws, and there are some people that you won't.
You definitely wouldn't, because they're going to turn around and,
And I suppose those are the flaws you know about. The flaws that you don't know about, you're open to everybody.
Everybody else sees it as a Johari window, isn't it?
Yeah, everybody else knows it except for you. They're the harder ones.
They're your blind spots.
Exactly that.
We need help from others.
And that's the reality is. So, and it's not that necessarily, so we should be flawed in everything online, but actually there's a wisdom to recognising we do make mistakes.
I came across, I was introduced to an interesting concept just today, a passage from a book that our dad's been reading, looking at the life of the Apostle Paul. And if you look at any of his writings, he talks a lot about these two things called the flesh and the spirit. And often we can come across, and we find it difficult to understand him because we live in a world where all of our metaphors are visual, and we think things occupy like a discrete space. So here's a chair, and nothing else is there because the chair is there. Here's a table, nothing else is there, and we think of my flesh as like my wrong self or the lower desires, and the spirit as this ideal new self. But how can they both exist in the same space at once? They literally can't, surely. And I think we're maybe touching on this idea here with this is the ideal self. I have this ideal that I want to live up to. But let's be honest, when I'm sitting there introspectively at night, I realize that's not how I am. And if I'm honest with myself, I despair over that. But the author of this book was saying we're using the wrong metaphor here. if we think instead of reality as just purely visual, we think of it in terms of sound or music. He said there can be two pieces of music played in a room at the same time, and one could be this horrible grungy metal music. Apologies to anyone that likes that, but like that is really quite aggressive and drowns everything else. You can play this beautiful classical Bach music, and they can both be on in the room. But until you turn the noise down on one and the other up, you wouldn't necessarily recognise that it's there at all. And so they can both coexist in the same space equally, and yet, what do I need to do in my life to maybe turn the music down on one and turn the music up on the other? I think that's ultimately where I'm coming to when we think about this concept of, oh yeah, it's great to have an ideal self, and it's great to even maybe recognise that my online presence or the way I live my life online might show me what my ideal self is. But then, what do I then need to do to take steps to amp that up, to ramp down the flesh or the stuff that's holding me back?
Yeah. So there we are. I think that should be our wrap up of that topic for now. Just on what is authenticity. That's an even interesting thing as well. Let us know what you think. What is your authentic self? What is your ideal self? And reflect on these things and let us know.
Online.